Welcome to the Sea Change Podcast with Audrey Lawrence, helping you smash your goals and unstick what's holding you back using the best hack from science and psychology. And now, here's Audrey.
Hey, it's Audrey Lawrence, and welcome to another episode of the Sea Change Network, broadcasting on WWPR or wherever you get your Sea Change podcast. I am so excited for today's guest, a true mentor to me. A Pulitzer Prize nominated author, a TEDx speaker, a publisher, a highly sought after world-class coach. Glenn Daniels has enriched my life, challenging me to think in a multi-layered way, looking at the breadth and the depth of conversation with no placation at all. Mentors have the way to light the path if you let them. If you allow somebody to illuminate the path, it can be a shortcut to your own success. And I'm so thrilled to introduce Glenn Daniels. Welcome, Glenn.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for such a wonderful introduction. As you were saying that, I started thinking, well, mentors come in all shapes. You don't know where they're coming from. You have been a mentor to me. You caused me that time we had that conversation to start thinking deeper myself and start realizing some things you're talking about, maybe I had forgotten. But that's all I think a mentor does, is remind you of what you already know.
Yeah, I think that you have to be willing to sort of lay yourself out there and to hear. And I think for a lot of us, certainly I've spent many years in my life where deciding to take in information or that I already knew it had to be a growing curve for me. I had to decide that if I wanted to improve any aspect of my life, I had to be willing to hear. There was no way I was going to be able to capture somebody's life experience in my little tiny bubble of a footprint. But if I was willing to reach out, if I was willing to posture, and in our case, sometimes I laugh because I feel like I'm almost stalking my mentors. You know, I'm following them on social media. I'm reading their blogs. I'm watching their YouTube channels. I'm looking at their posts on Instagram or LinkedIn. And finally, I got to that place where I said, I have a responsibility to reach out to my mentor and say, you've shaped me with your words. You caused this reaction in me. I think about your conversations that you shared with somebody else, and it impacts the decisions I make the next day. And isn't that the best example of teacher and mentor, or student and teacher, or mentee and mentor? And it's a special relationship. It doesn't always have to be so defined, but I think the single piece that I knew I needed to learn more about you was when I saw your TEDx talk about SMART goals. Now, Glenn, I just wrote the book Sea Change, and I have a whole section in my book about SMART goals and why it doesn't entirely work. Certainly it didn't work in my life, and how I sort of had to retool it for my own success. Can you share with our listeners about your version of SMART goals?
Well, I'm a person who really kind of says it doesn't work in your personal life or your professional life. And this is why when we sit down and say we have to lay down a specific goal, we lose one of our powers. And one of our powers is to be flexible. So even though I have a goal, let's say I have a goal to put myself out in front of 100 million people this year, okay, through podcasts like yours, and through that. So if that's one of my goals, I have to have the flexibility to get there. When you lay out a specific goal, what you're doing is playing it safe. And if you're going to make a goal that makes a difference on the planet, you can't be safe with it. You have to decide what you want to do, what's in your heart, what's your passion, what's your power, what's your purpose here, and go with it right there. So that's the S. If you're going to write a specific goal, write why. Why do you want it? Why are you going to achieve it? Why is it important? That's the specificity that I would ask that you put in.
And that's a huge question.
Yeah. I mean, why? If you're going to measure something, if you look at the A and the R, align, achieve, achievable, agreed upon, I'm going to come back to measure, but if you look at just the A part of it, who in the world can tell you what's achievable for you?
Wow.
You can't even tell yourself that. You don't know what you can do. All of us have done something and went past what we thought we could do. You don't know what you're capable of doing. So why would I limit to that? Unless I wanted to play it safe.
Yeah, I want to share with our guests the acronym SMART stands for
Yes.
specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. It's
Yes.
a methodology of getting things done. But when you try to put this SMART goals into action, it can fall down, and you've got some really solid points. So if we have the setbacks of this not being really the tool it's propped up to be, and it's everywhere. I mean, gosh,
Yes.
it's in my book.
Every
There's
place.
10 books on it. We teach it in conferences. We empower our leaders in the world to go out with this potentially broken tool and go out and make change. And that could be why, to go back to my primary point for everything, why we miss hitting our goals 93% of the time. If the tools
See,
we're using are broken, then how are we setting ourselves up for success?
it's broken for sure when it comes to goal setting. If you're going to use SMART, make it SMART accountability. So my partners, accountability partners, we lay out a SMART accountability chart. Okay, so we're going to say, all right, what are you going to do specifically this week? How do we know that you won this week? Okay, do you agree to get it done? And is it realistic for you to get it done? So as we said in our accountability goals, maybe that's there. Or I don't even call it goals. When we set our accountability, maybe we use SMART there. But it fails when you set your goals. It fails all that because it's playing it safe.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Uh,
agree. I agree.
I know.
I feel like when I wrote SMART, I talked about how it fell down for me personally.
Hmm.
Um, and I said I use it in sort of a today fashion. So it can't be the
Yes.
big picture. It has to just be in the moment. It just really, you ask yourself these questions about what you can get done in the next 3 hours. So if my plan is to, have 4 shows in 1 hour, though I've tried, PS, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
No, that's not an attainable goal. That's not the route of time management. That's not a product that I can produce in that. And when we start hitting failure with our goals, there's this interesting backslide that happens when we start bumping up against failure. Most of us, to the tune of more than 90% of us, start backslipping. And when we backslip on our goals because tools are broken, then things like self-doubt creep in. And when self-doubt creeps in, that is the time when we feel like giving up. And giving up is the number one reason why people don't hit their goals. We need to build
Yeah,
tolerances.
they
Tolerances that,
hit some level where they back out and something goes on. But if you're going to set powerful, useful goals, first thing you got to do is be that. Okay. The doing, the having is a whole nother story that comes easier when you're being that. You are a radio personality host. You're being a radio personality host, which means if I'm going to be this, I have to do a certain amount of shows every week.
yeah,
Because
it's
a
hard.
radio superstar like yourself is going to be that and going to do what's necessary. And if they need to change something along the way because it's a little bit of a failure, if you want to call that, they're still that radio host.
Yeah.
They're still that powerful person that they are.
And I think that's the conversation sometimes for me. You feel like the imposter. This is all such a new place for me. I'm like, oh, am I suffering from this imposter mentality where I get it and you're technically right. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, gosh. And then that voice of doubt kicks in. And that's the difference between the boardroom and our own personal success rate when that little tiny thin end of the wedge starts prying apart our worthiness and our value and our opportunity. And I think that is one of the single important points to coming up with a game plan to either protect yourself from or shroud or shield yourself from, so that
Mm.
when you want to charge through these goals and you've got 5 radio shows to do and you're doing it in front of a 3 million audience, that you're able to do it in a way that you don't necessarily feel like an imposter.
Well, and think about it this way, though. When you're doing it in a way that you're making things happen, you're that person. I would ask you to say when you hit a challenge, how would you feel? Just focus back on how do I feel being this person? Okay.
Right.
Whenever you hit that goal or hit that wall, well, how do I feel being this type of person?
Right.
If I'm this type of person, I'll just take that lesson so I can do it better next time because I am that person. It's tough sometimes because there's a wedge there. You used to call it a small wedge, but it's a huge wedge. How many hours a day do we watch TV? How many hours a day do we watch all the negative news channels? They're making their money by bringing you the negative news. How many hours a day are we around negative people? Yeah, it's better now that we're at home working, but that's over with pretty soon, I think, in 6 months or so. But how many hours a day are we around the negativity? So I just labeled it, you got to have CNNP. It just has to be that way. CNNP. You got to avoid constant negative news and people. And you have to really make that happen
Yeah.
because that's the wedge that will help you decide, okay, everybody else is failing. The world is so bad. And you may not think it consciously, but it's in your subconscious mind because you just watch Wolf Blitzer breaking news or, whatever show you watch. And if it's all, even the regular TV, some of those laugh tracks are based upon bad news.
Absolutely. I think that, that pulls back around to the why. As I sit here saying, oh, am I doing this right? Or is there negativity shrouding me? Then the question that I have to boil it back down to is why. And that goes back to the specific. You ask me to, instead of using specific in our SMART goals, but ask yourself the why. And when I ask myself the why about why I'm, in my case, doing this, sitting in this seat, it's because I don't want the negative news. It's because I want to find purpose and share an idea with somebody. It's because I want to engage in greater good where people have the opportunity to share their own ideas. And the why helps then clarify my specificity about my
Mm-hmm.
SMART goal. So
It
thank you.
does.
That's cool. Do I
It
owe
really
you
does.
therapy after this? Because it feels great.
And we just have to face that challenge that everything out there that we just allow to come in our minds without controlling it, 93% of that, odd number that matches what's 93% failure rate is, 93% of that is not uplifting.
Yeah.
There was a while back where I got back to it about 3 years ago, but don't watch news, period. Not the nightly news, not the news channels. Didn't watch that, and because one of my favorite people, Wayne Dyer, had mentioned, you're going to find out what you need to know.
I
If
quote
something
him in my
happens in the
book.
news,
Yeah, I love him.
yeah, oh, he's just great. I was listening to him last night, by the way, but he said you're going to find out what you need to know. That's just all there is to it. If there's some breaking news, you're going to need to know it.
Yeah.
So I was in. This is how long ago it was. I was in the habit of not watching the news. I just get up and go to the gym and go sit down at my favorite coffee shop and have a cup of coffee, and then just start charting out my day for the day. This particular day proved him 100% right. I had gotten to the coffee shop, sat down, just happened to look up at the TV and to watch that second plane hit the World Trade Center.
Oh,
The news I needed to know, I got.
yeah.
I needed to know what was going on. Same thing happened when we had that Columbine shooting here in Colorado. Well, that was the first mass school shooting that was advertised, although we don't talk about them, but there's a lot before then. But, I needed to know that. Only because I needed to know that because my daughter was going to school near there.
Wow.
But I wasn't watching the news. I just happened to walk into a building that had it going on. I knew to cancel the appointment, get in my car, and get to her.
Yep.
Those type of issues. If you need to know something, you're going to find it. So stop watching the news, ladies and gentlemen. Stop watching the news.
Yeah, I'm on the same team of no news. I have not a heavy story, but a very lighthearted story about, get up, go to the gym, come back home, and everybody, I live in the Northeast, so when we get snow, we get snow.
You do.
And everybody's windshield wipers are standing. People will pull their windshield wipers off of their windscreen and stand them up before a snowstorm. And I get in the driveway and I say to my husband, there must be snow coming. I don't watch the news. Because everybody's windshield wipers are standing up. They pull them off and we started laughing like, okay, I guess we'll have to turn on the news to see. And sure enough, there was a blizzard coming into the Northeast, and you'll get the content that you need. Unfortunately, we're built in this addictive cycle of tuning into the news. It is built to call us back in and to make us feel like we need to hold for this very important piece of information. But what I wish people knew about the brain was that when we expose ourselves, that we have some parts of our brain are this old hedonic caveman brain. And the
Mm-hmm.
picture that we see isn't necessarily distinguished from how our brain sees it. So for example, they've done really cool neurology tests where they show somebody a picture and then they start to salivate. So if they can show somebody a picture of spaghetti and all of a sudden your mouth waters. Well, clearly it's just a photograph of spaghetti. It's not really food. But because our brain doesn't necessarily separate picture from reality, we have a visceral response to it. And when we continue to share these really horrific pictures in our brain, like with all things in our brain, cells connect with other cells, creating paths of knowledge. And what happens is when we subject ourselves to violence, or we subject ourselves to these terrible outcomes, our brain gets used to seeing things. And two things happen. We get used to seeing violence and it doesn't become rare and it doesn't offend us at the level that it should, and it becomes normal. And our brain is now corrupted in a way that we have a different standard about how we think people should be treated, what is appropriate for us to see. I'm constantly shocked by what I see as the bar being lowered in news. They're constantly showing the unthinkable. No longer
Yes.
are they even warning you that this next is disturbing. They're just showing it. Because now we're all attached to the TV. It is our main source of information. Given a pandemic, gosh forbid we tune out, we'll miss an opportunity for a vaccination, we'll miss an opportunity for a piece of world news, and we're stuck on this cycle. What would you recommend, Glenn, to sort of purge yourself or find that breakaway where you feel informed enough, but you don't necessarily are glued to the news 5 hours a day?
I would suggest you start with small bites. Just decide, okay, if you're watching the news 5 hours a day, take 30 minutes off of it.
Yeah.
I would strongly suggest, though, that you go into silent meditation or silent prayer. It needs to be silent. You need to just spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes a day on it at start. I know there's people do it for 2 to 3 hours. I don't think that's necessary. Okay? I think if you just do 20 minutes a day of silence, you'll get to enjoy that silence, and the TV won't come on unless you're watching an educational piece that you've chosen to bring into your mind. Okay. I would also suggest and take small bites to reduce some of that time you're watching. I would take small bites to I would do the meditation, but also would just say take the idea of writing. Okay, write instead of watching TV, write your day's results. But I would suggest that you also sit down and say, okay, here, what did I learn today that I didn't get from the news? Or how did I know they were going to talk about that on the news today? If you have that written down someplace, you'll start building that case that I don't need the news that much anymore. I mean, what did I learn in the news that's affecting my job? Well, nothing.
I
I
love
could be
it.
wrong about that, but
I feel like even taking the challenge to the next level. I think that to ask somebody to dump something is, will it really happen? I want to ask myself, I'll start with there. Measure how you feel after watching, you fill in the blank, 5 o'clock news, 7 o'clock news, CNN, whatever your vehicle of choice is, and measure how you feel after you've dedicated this time box to being quiet, to meditation. And writing, if you choose to use that time to write, you need to know that when you write words on paper with pen, you embed things deeper into your head. So if you have a goal, if you have a dream, if you have a hope, if you have a loved one you want to share and talk about, if you have a wish in your heart, grab a piece of paper, grab your notebook, and just, even if you doodle, you can doodle your dreams. And the opportunity of doing this creates a deeper connection that we just don't get typing on an interface. If you choose to use this time, and I'm a terrible meditator, I write about it. I'm shocking. Like, I have a whole chapter about how I can't meditate. I've studied the neuroscience behind it. I've gone through all of it and come up with a way to hack what I call hack meditation, which is the benefits of meditation actually grow your brain. And that's why I'm so jealous about meditators. You actually grow gray matter. Your brain gets larger. You focus your default mode network, you calm the parts of your brain that pull you off course, you find clarity, you feel better, you have higher focus. All these gifts are given to you for motivation. So if you can't find motivation that actually works for you, and I'm still a student of it, I'm struggling, but working on it, take that 10 minutes, sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and have sort of focused meditation, your own quiet time where you doodle your dreams. And then I ask you, give me that 10 minutes. How do you feel after the 20 minutes you spent on the news and then the 10 minutes you spent in your tranced meditative state if you're just doodling like me? And measure real outcome. Let's have real analytics. Let's see truthfully how you feel. Because I'm going to guarantee you there is nothing you missed on the news. One time I looked at the newscast, it ran 4 minutes of content spread out over an hour and a half.
Oh yeah, yeah, because they got to pay the bills too. They got to pay those salaries. I want to just challenge you just a little bit on this idea of comparing how you feel after 15, 10, however many minutes you meditate that you didn't watch the news. I'm thinking that as your brain doesn't communicate, the true subconscious brain doesn't communicate in language. It communicates on a vibrational scale. So since it's vibrating the answers, I think it's really hard for you to sit down and say, okay, well, I felt better for the 15 minutes. Now, a week from now, you will be able to say, oh, you know what? There were some great changes. So if you did it for the next 7 days, you might be able to pick up how you feel better 2-3 days down the line. But look at it 7 days from now.
Okay.
Because that vibrational change is already set up. Those neural networks have already connected to new things. And then that's when your conscious mind can say, oh, yeah, I can write about that because I can see it. I can put it.
I like
most
it.
of the power of meditation is a vibrational communication you get with for lack of a better word, the universe.
All right. So there's the challenge. I want to hear if people find, and you can message into the show. I think that there would be sort of an immediate moment of pause, just because we see brain scans that show us that there's quieting of the default mode network pretty immediately. But you're suggesting there's continuing valuation, which is even more supportive to continuing a practice of finding your Zen, as I like to call it. But I like it. I think any way you cut it, it's deciding to prioritize yourself. Now, what's the value of all of this? Because you actually grow your brain size, because you become more focused, because you want clarity in life, because you want to feel better, because it causes that space for you to nurture yourself. So, gosh, if I told you that all of these things are free and you grow a bigger brain, it seems like to me, this would be a mandatory practice for all of us. But yet here I am, I struggle. I struggle to even commit to that 10-minute time, but yet the TV's on in the background. It's really deciding to make that conscious practice to say, yep, I'm going to improve the state of my well-being today. And I'm going to, addition to my life by subtraction. I'm going to eliminate the things that don't add to me.
Well, and a lot of the challenge with that for a lot of folks is that they will always look for the short-term gratification before the long-term gratification. We'll always look for that. We'll accept how we can feel good right now versus how we can feel good in a week.
Yep.
And if we don't feel good right now, okay, I'm on a diet. If I'm on a diet and I'm hungry right now, I want that Oreo cookie. But if I wait for 3 weeks, maybe I can get myself into reasonable shape and enjoy life better, live longer, get through health challenges. So that's part of that challenge, is that we always look for that the short-term gratification has a stronger pull than the long-term gratification.
Absolutely. And I share with some of my coaching clients that if you knew that was part of your brain called the amygdala that causes us to have immediate reward, especially if we have stress. So if you have a bad day or a bad conversation or something upsets you, we immediately return to something that gives us comfort. For so many of us, that is food. So if you were to isolate that moment and say, oh, that's my hedonic, that's my caveman brain, because what it does is it wants to soothe and satisfy, because fire is hot. And if we pull our hand away from fire hot and we soothe ourselves immediately, that will be able to sort of give us that immediate return. It's another reason our brains are dumb. Our smart brains are very dumb. They're set up with some of these old hedonic thinking that we can't undo. But when we shine light on them, and I have that moment where I'm doing a caveman brain, and I say, oh, that's my caveman brain, my instant need to satisfy the hunger in the moment, the pain in the moment. It moves us away from having retrospectives for failure. Because we don't like to look at our own fail points, we can't succeed, because success comes when we examine and unfurl that moment of failure. Businesses do
Yes.
it beautifully. In our own caveman brain, we say, ouch, fire hot, don't touch it again. And we move away from it. It's wired into our brain so that we can succeed as a pack, that we can
Yes.
carry on for generations. But it
Yes.
holds us back from being able to achieve our goals if we can't look at them retrospectively.
Right. Because back in the days when that power was there for you, caveman days, if for lack of a better term, that's what you needed. You need to find immediate satisfaction to satisfy your stomach because it might be 2 weeks before you get to eat again.
Yep.
We're not that way now.
Nope.
We have
But
to
we
kind of,
still have that brain.
yeah, we still have that brain. That brain still kind of runs us because that's how it was built, but we should be evolving from that pretty quickly.
You'd hope. My professor at Princeton talks about it in the road rage, and he frames it like, road rage makes no sense in our brains. We're driving down the road, we get so mad, so out of control, we're shaking our fist at the air. That's the old caveman brain. We're never going to see this car again. It's 2 minutes of our life. It didn't change the path of our trajectory in the day, but we just
Hmm.
explode in eruptive feeling because back in the day when we were challenged by somebody, it meant our life, it meant our mate, it meant our home, it meant
Yes.
subscribing to that bigger life where we were going to actually make our generations last. But now
Yeah.
it just makes no sense. And I'm totally guilty of road rage. And I was like, when he said that, Professor Wright, I was like, wow, you know
That's
what?
me.
That's
That's yeah.
me. So
Yeah.
much of our reasoning is built into that hedonic brain. And it's a little bit easier to set free when you can put sort of a finger point on it and you can identify it and say, road rage. That's the old caveman brain. Take a seat. Find a stone to sit on, caveman.
There you go. And see, I think the challenge for a lot of us is that we do not have that self-awareness to say that was a mistake there. I didn't do it the way I am who I am. I'm being a thought leader. I'm being a perfect husband, not a perfect husband, but I'm being a husband. I'm being a wife. I'm not, I'm this. When I did that, I wasn't being that. I need to look at that and start looking because if you don't face your failures, your weak points, see, that's another subject. People write about focus on your strengths.
I
No,
disagree.
yeah, don't focus on your strengths
I
because
disagree.
your strengths are there.
Yep.
Focus on the weaknesses so your strengths can be stronger.
Yep. 100%. And it's a big chapter in the book for me.
Oh,
I write
I didn't know
about
that.
how I was pushed away from math and how my entire life I was encouraged towards science. And in that, I wasn't allowed to grow in my deficiencies. People who thought they were protecting me from pain or they were protecting me from the opportunity of feeling the sting of failure really kept me away from math. And then this undercurrent in my life started to take hold. Now I start telling people I'm bad at math. I start professing this, even though I'm probably
Hmm.
not. But what happens is when we tell our brains these things, cells talk to other cells, creating connected paths. And this becomes part of the language. And our brain loves to be efficient. So our brain follows that path. And now I'm convincing
Exactly.
myself. And
Yeah.
in that, I didn't pursue the paths that I wanted in life. It wasn't until I was a grown up that I went back to school and went to MIT after I got my hands around math.
So, and the thing is, you started finding evidence that you weren't good at math, and you had to make that change someplace along the line to say, okay, maybe that was wrong. Okay, and then we have to look at the fact how society shapes women. Okay, you're not supposed to be good at math. Okay.
Yep.
And even though we think we've grown past that, I can show you evidence. If you watch the news every single day, I can show you evidence where they make sure that you understand as a woman that you're not that level. That
What's so fascinating about that is how that data, I'm very familiar with that data. So how that data is served up is that women, and we'll pretend that boys and girls, for the sake of conversation, are both the same in math. Actually, girls are actually just a tiny bit higher. But because they are as good in the next subject, so they are almost as good in science, and boys are less good in science, the gap of boys are better in math than they are in science became the rhetoric. So it was how they took that data, that information, and chose to break it down into a conversation. Always be leery of statistics if they're really not transparent with all the details. And don't let yourself be a number. You can defy statistics. You just don't have to fall into these gaps that start creating this undercurrent of your value. It is for you to define what you want to do. I wasn't good at math. I had to change that conversation. I wanted to reseed my wheat field of my neurons in the brain about how I framed myself. And very quickly, I was teaching children algorithms and participating in PhD classes at MIT. But it took the willingness to be an interior designer to change my field to go completely juxtaposition if I was willing to challenge myself and be open to the concept that, you know what, I might just be okay at math, and that's okay.
Yeah, experience leads to judgment, and if you experience failure, that really leads to great judgment. And our fear is so much failure that if someone is telling us that we're not good at math, you're not going to be. I grew up with the ideal that there would never be a black president. That tells you how old I am. But when it happened, that changed the whole paradigm, right? It will be one, be another one. It will soon be a woman president, maybe. But we have this going on because of what we put in our minds, what we're taught from watching the negative news,
Yep.
from watching TV commercials, from watching,
CNNP.
yeah, from all that.
Tell
And
our
so
listeners
therefore,
what
that's what we see.
CNNP stands for again.
Constant negative news and people. Avoid them.
So what if we're like related to these negative people? I'm not naming any names, PS. But
Yeah, yeah.
how do we manage those relationships that are close to us? I write a little bit about it, but I'm curious about your thoughts on it.
That takes a bit of practice because you have to get in the habit of surrendering. And so you have to understand you don't want that person judging you. So you can't judge them. So you just have to surrender to them. Let them be negative. But if you surrender to it, they can be negative, but it has no effect upon me. I'm
I
fine
like
with it.
that.
No, you can be negative if you want to, and you can even talk the negativity around me. I surrender to it. Just let it just flows over your head like water rushing over your head in the river.
Good.
It just goes because you surrendered yourself to it, and you say, "Fine, I surrender. I'm not going to fight you on this. I'm not going to change you, and you're not going to change me because I'm just going to relax into it."
I like that. I read a whole chapter on it. I feel like part of it is that so often we ask for the feedback, that what do you think? For years as an interior designer, I would design a beautiful room. And the first thing my client would do is get on the phone, call her, neighbor over and ask that what I call the question of death. What do you think? And then she'd be gut wrenched if the answer didn't come back with exactly what she wanted. And I just started encouraging people to, instead of asking somebody what they think about your work, why don't you share with them that you're so happy with it? Why don't you share with them, instead of asking for input from someone who's never hit their own goals, what answer do you think you're going to get from someone who's never been able to find their own wings in life? What answer are they going to give you about your own dreams?
And that's the huge picture. When people don't hit their dreams or they're fearful or jealous of you, person who brings a friend over to say, "What do you think of my new design in my home?" If that person who's your friend may be a good friend, but they haven't seen it, they haven't seen it in their own life, what are they going to say to you? No, they're more than likely going to say, "Well, this should be over here. I'm not sure that was set up right," and they're going to nitpick. This goes to a little bit of different, but why don't you get in the habit of minding your own spiritual business, minding your own life course, minding what you need to do, who you are, who you're going to be, and then stop worrying about so many other people. It took me a while to start doing my YouTube channel again, my podcast channel again, because I didn't learn my own lesson I've been teaching. I was so concerned about the comments I might get, or because I'm getting back into the flow of being the podcast and things like that again. I'm making mistakes. The other day, I started my podcast. 10 minutes into it, I realized the microphone was still on mute. Like we would have started today if it wasn't for you. But it's still, as a live podcast, I couldn't do anything except for come back and get started with it. You're going to make mistakes, but I learned from that mistake. I learned from that judgment. I'm not going to look at other people for their judgment. Um, we started out about this, but Emerson in his Law of Compensation essay, I can just kind of rephrase it for you. But I think I don't remember the whole thing, but what I drew from it was simply that we know everything we need to know. And I need to focus on who I am being to get those answers. Okay. Real easy way to look at certain things. You spoke about being around negative people. Okay. When I was married, my wife and I were downtown Denver one day, walking down the streets. We just decided we're going to take a couple of days away from the home and just get a hotel downtown. So we got to a hotel. She complained about the whole walk. about everything that she saw that was wrong, people out on the street begging for money, this and that, this and that. On the other side of it, though, I didn't see any of that. And I'm asking her, where'd you see that at? Where was that? What street was that on? When did you see that? Because I didn't see any of it. It was a difference of what we focused on. I wasn't looking for the negative, but she was that particular day. If you have she could have easily poisoned the day that way. Okay. If you go to somebody who's negative and you care about what they say, you always want to be loving and supportive. But you know who you are. There's no way that someone should be able to come to you and downgrade your work, especially if they're not even trying it.
Yeah.
And I just kind of discovered the haters will do that. And that's why when we talk about smart goal setting, part of that is kind of dumb, is when we sit down and write our goals and share them with people. That just doesn't make any sense in the world. If you set a goal, a powerful goal that's going to make a difference on this planet, in this world, you keep it to yourself.
That's me. I think I'm afraid of people's rhetoric around my goal, and I'm not interested in the negative energy. So I just zip it up.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's the right thing to do or the healthy thing to do. It's just a practice that works for me, because honestly, I come across more people challenging and trying to pull me off course, and I can be shaped, like all of us. I can be shaped by someone's value of what I should or shouldn't be doing. So when I have something that's big, I just sort of, like, this whole process that I've been going through, I was sort of closely held about it, just because, I wasn't interested in, listen, I'm a wacky kid. I have got a lot of failures. I'm not interested in adding to that doppelganger junkyard of failures. I'm more interested in achieving my goals and finding the people that support that process. I have a much more aggressive mentality when it comes to doubting, hating naysayers. I say, I need armor, block them out, don't ask, don't invite that energy to your life. Don't open up the conversation if they're the kind of person that's an energy sucker. I recognize the things that have that negative impact on me, and I move them out of my life. I subtract that equation. Even if it's social media, I start putting blockers in the spaces that subtract and don't charge my batteries, because there's only so much in me. And if I give a piece to everybody, what do I have left at the end of the day? I still have a family and a home and a life and a job and this other job now. So I have a much more sort of aggressive guerrilla mentality when it comes to managing negative energy. And you know what? I have to say, everyone's been so kind. And so I don't really come up against that, but because I'm conscientious of it, I sort of fortify what it is to protect my dream, because no one else can push this forward but me. This is my exclusive responsibility to push it forward.
See, now I'm going to challenge you just a hair on that, because when you put the effort in to block somebody, when you put the effort in to pay attention to what they're saying negative, you're not letting it just kind of stream by you. You're not surrendering to it. You can say what you want to say about it. That's not going to change the difference I'm making on this world. Now, I would highly suggest you keep that huge goal out of everybody else's eyes, because the people who love you the most are the ones who are going to have the most negative consequences on you.
And everyone's been super supportive. I just am afraid, that I'm going to, disappoint my mom, or, but I see what you're saying. I always chant the mantra, be like water, don't overreact or underreact. A stone hits water and has the appropriate response to it. The right amount of ripples come out of it. But I have to say that that's really not the truth of how I work on the inside. I can get nervous and I can get concerned and don't want to rock the boat or upset people. And I have to sort of pull back. They're not super strong attributes about myself. I sort of boil it down to, again, that caveman brain. When we work in a pack, when we're part of a clan, we tend to make sure that the leaders in front of us, that we're in check with them. It's important for us to feel like we're part of a tribe. That's part of our identity. So if we over-connect to our tribe, as maybe I tend to do, in that, I probably have these concerns that I'm aligning with all of my life leaders. And it's, when I frame it like that, it's just a caveman brain moment. And I'm not going to be kicked out of the tribe just because I have a unique path. In that, that's a way for me to say, oh, okay, I can reframe those energies. They probably come from that old hedonic brain.
Yeah. And even though we're keeping our goals for ourselves, if you feel the need to share with people who are aligned with you, make that your accountability.
I do. I share with you, like, I even wrote in the book about, I was very honest about, working on a TED Talk event. So I'm setting up a TED Talk event and I'm working to be an organizer. And obviously I've made the submission process. And so, but it's interesting how closely held I just naturally am. I don't know why. I have to sort of ask myself those questions. Why do I feel so closely held? I don't think I want to disappoint, and I don't want to share failures with the world. Though I like retrospectives and I like being critiqued by them, I definitely feel that energy in me. And I think it's about knowing where your weaknesses are, being willing to call them out, put your finger on it, and then just sort of laying it bare out and saying, okay, how can I improve this about myself?
You bring up a very good point, though, that I kind of want to ask about. You say that you closely held and you're not really sure why, but it serves you. So why do you care?
I don't know if it serves me. I think that that's why I need mentors to shape me and to tell me. I don't, I just always want to ask the question, am I checking all of the balance of what it is to make myself the most enriched I can be today? And that's that conversation where you ask, how have I fallen down? Where can I succeed? Where are the weak points that might be tender to talk about? How can I grow in those spaces? How can I learn from others around me? I have a laundry list of massive goals, and it's so cool to see some of them opening. But the process of really being as earnest with myself, as uncomfortable as that conversation can be, challenging myself to think differently, you've taught me that so much in our conversations, is part of my process of getting there. And it's that checks
Hmm.
and balance. It's that risk reward of failing a little bit in exchange for larger returns that I might get. I had that list of mentors, all 5 of these world-class leaders, yourself included, multiple TED Talk speakers, best-selling authors, I mean, Pulitzer Prize nominated authors yourself. And I sought on this journey to reach out and connect with the people that shaped my life, and do it on the radio, do it for a show, do it for, a submission to larger networks, for the
Right.
purpose of, if I were to be brave enough to just try something really crazy and outlandish, what would the return be? Well, I'll tell you, I've done that whole list. I've been blessed enough to have conversations with people that shape my life and are shaping other people's lives and encouraging people to find their own mentors.
See, I'm wondering if your audience heard the key you just gave.
Maybe.
I just wonder if they heard that. I don't know if you even heard it yourself, but I heard it and it just all kind of congealed. You said you check in with yourself to see whether this is right, this is wrong, if you're doing the right thing, if this is how you need to change course. That is power. When you check in with yourself. Yeah, it's always good to bring other information in that might help. How do you do a better podcast? How do you do a better TED Talk? How do you do this? How do you do other information? But you check in with yourself to see if you're reaching that main goal that you set for yourself. You're not checking in with everybody else, family and friends, because when we do that, sometimes we're just checking in to soothe our own ego. I'm better than you, I got better goals. Or that person's going to attack you or going to try to protect you, which is more hurtful than them attacking you. When someone tries to protect you from the fall, that is actually more hurtful, I believe, than the person who says, that was a lousy podcast. I think I'd rather have that feedback. I don't care though. You can say what you want to say. I'm going to keep on going, okay? Because my overall goal is to reach and to do this and to do this and to do this. The key that I hope your audience heard you say is that you check in with yourself.
Well, I wish I could say that that was really well planned, but honestly, it wasn't. And that's why you need mentors around you to hold up the mirror, to reflect light on your own path, to give you a morsel, to pull out that nugget in a relationship that gives you something to really think about. Glenn, how can people learn more about you? How can you come and speak at their organization and teach them? Because I know you have so much content in that space. How can people learn more about you?
I have a very simple method, and it's just called scheduleglenn.com. Okay, scheduleglenn.com. That's the one thing that I get to look at. And my assistant, she doesn't get a hold of that one, but it's a 10 to 15 minute chance for us to talk. And that's all it is. Just take 15 minutes to talk and see if we can work together, if we need to do things together. If you think I might be a good guest for you at your next meeting or think online or whatever it is, we first need to talk for 10 to 15 minutes, because within that 10 minutes, we're going to know whether we can work together or not. So
Absolutely.
scheduleglenn.com. Yeah, you could go to the website and all that, but we need to talk first.
I love
And
it.
that's how you
Who's
and I did,
given
right?
such amazing access like that? It's a cool access. And let me tell you, today's show was just Glenn and I talking. Like, we decided we were going into this with no script. Like, there was no pre-done questions. There was no agenda. There was no conversation piece. Because when I have conversations with Glenn that are just organic, that's when magic happens. I mean, we've had more hours of conversation that were supposed to start in little tiny windows that just bled out into taking over, as much time as he's willing to share with me, because the organic, natural moment happens when it's not overshaped, when it can just be authentic. And that's what I appreciate
Yeah.
so much about my time with you.
And that's what's wrong with, I think, the sales process too, and all this. People want to give you their sales routine. No, let's just talk. Forget all that. Let's just talk,
Yeah.
because we can connect. If we connect, then you're good. We're going to be good for business for each other. So, but even with that said, though, I just talk to sometimes the people who I know can't afford the service.
Right.
Because if you're struggling with, like, no, you mentioned it earlier, volunteerism, giving things away. If you're struggling with something, well, I might just tell you, go to your closet. It's part of your goal setting process anyway. Go to your closet and take everything out, and only put back the things in there that you've worn in the last 6 months or the previous season. Everything else goes to Goodwill.
I love
Okay.
it.
And that's volunteerism. Okay. Everything you.
That's a little dramatic, I'm just going to say. I love it, but that
I'll
takes
tell
a
you this
whole
quick
leap
story
of
about
braveness.
when my ex-wife got finally read my book. She said, "Well, I want to do this, but what I'm not going to do is go clean up the closet. I'm not throwing anything away." I said, "I appreciate that, but let's just go ahead and just go through it together." And I said, "I'll leave you alone. You do it." And she didn't want to do it. She started crying. And I said, I wasn't her first marriage, but I said, I want you to think about something. You left your husband because he was abusive to you, very abusive to you. And when you left, you were fortunate that you were able to go back to your parents' house. How many women can't do that? How many women have to leave their house without the clothing? What if, now the tears are really flowing, what if you decided to take those clothes and give it to other women who were in that situation where they had to leave the house without anything,
Wow.
not even able to go get another job? The tears really started to flow, but you know what? 2 hours later, everything was on the bed. 4 hours later, the closet was only about half full again.
That's what a leader, a mentor can help you do. Frame the way you look at your own circumstance. Find the opportunity to find gratitude in your own space, regardless of where you are, and allow you to do good for others. I don't think those conversations can be had in our own accountability. I don't think that I could move through this process without people like you, Glenn. Thank you so much for today's show. Before
You're
we
more than
go,
welcome.
I know there's so much we could go on for hours, and we will. We'll have you back for multiple shows. I know we've talked about a lot of things, but I always like to give somebody a moment to just share something before they leave. Is there anything that is still kicking around in your head, or something that we didn't touch on that you want to talk about?
We talked about it, but I just want to remind everybody, be who you are. Okay. If you don't know what that was, maybe go back to your childhood. What was fun and exciting for you as a child? Be the best. Just be who you are. Be that first. Be the great talk show host that you are. Be that first. And then everything else follows. So be first.
I like that. Glenn Daniels, Pulitzer Prize nominated author, TEDx speaker, publisher, a highly sought after, world-class coach, and clearly you see why, and one of my personal board of directors. I hope you join us next month on WWPR, where I do a special series outlining the 5 board of directors, my 5 personal mentors, and the pursuit of interviewing all of them and what they mean to me in my personal journey on goals. This is Audrey Lawrence, and you're listening on the See Change podcast on WWPR or wherever you get your podcast. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the See Change podcast with Audrey Lawrence. See Change, a book written by a chick, but not a chick book. To learn more and download your free workbook, go to audreylawrence.org.